WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by J.W. Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on there. We're coming to you from Star Communications Channel 16. There's replays of this show at 7 p.m. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Each and every week, the show airs at 2:30 to 3:30 on Tuesdays on WCLN Radio and Star Communications, a reprint in the Sampson Weekly newspaper. I want to thank you for your continued input and conversation to our email box, weshouldknowedu@gmail.com, weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. Last week's show with Eddie Ray brought a lot of attention to not only the music industry, but a lot of folks would email me and say, had no idea we had a fellow from North Carolina that had made it to Executive Vice President, Capitol Records, and various other positions. I want to thank all those folks that commented on that. So today we're going to kind of change the discussion a little bit. We're going to be talking about another subject which should be near and dear to everybody. I want to first of all thank both of these folks for being here. To my right, immediate right, is Henry or Hank Raper. You're the town manager in Nashville, North Carolina. I'm going to just give part of your bio information out, so I'm not going to try to leave anything out. But you're a graduate of law school at Campbell. You got your Juris Doctorate there in 2015. You have an exemplary record, and this is important, I think, for folks to understand about you, Hank, is that you were awarded the 2 book awards for the highest grades in law school class in the subjects of real estate planning and 20th century legal thought. That's pretty strong. I want to move quickly to the chief, and you're the chief of police, Tom Bashore. Tom, you're chief of police in Nashville. You have also kind of a stellar record, and I'm always touched when I see these kinds of things. You received the ROTC commission to the United States Army Reserve, retired at the rank of captain. You have seen duty in a number of fronts to include Desert Shield and Desert Storm. Your overseas assignments have included Japan, Honduras, Belgium, Spain, Netherlands. 14 years with the Rocky Mount Police Department. You've served in multiple positions in law enforcement, to include school resource officer, narcotics detective, hostage negotiator, narcotics supervisor, street enforcement team supervisor, and patrol. First, let me say thank you for your service to this country.
Thank you. When you read that, it sounds like you're talking about somebody else.
Well, sometimes these introductions get kind of surreal, and they get a little bit lengthy, Hank, but I want folks to know the quality of the folks that are willing to come and sit down and talk to us. And the other part is, too, I don't think there's a time any more important for folks to understand the quality of people that we have got that have dedicated themselves to public service, because it's getting to be a challenge.
Yes.
I want to start today, the program, and the topic today is this huge issue of substance abuse in North Carolina, in the United States. And this was a publication that was, in fact, the news coverage on it was the WNCN, which is a major news channel in the area here, covered this just in April. And it said a new report has mapped out 25 worst cities in the United States for opioid abuse. And North Carolina showed up 4 times on that list, and Wilmington, North Carolina was number 1. And this is in the United States. Chief, I'll start with you. Been in law enforcement a long time, seen a lot of stuff. When you first became aware of that, obviously you've got a background in law enforcement, so you know there's been a lot of issues with substance abuse out there. What was the first thing that struck you? Because I want to talk about a program that you and your town engaged in. What struck you? What kind of engaged you? What was the visceral feeling you had?
Well, it's much different than it was heroin addiction than it was back in the 50s and 60s nowadays. And so to see that 4 of those top 25 cities or towns were in the state of North Carolina was pretty evident that the drug addiction of heroin abuse was permeating all over the United States, and it was definitely coming and heading south. We saw, when we first started looking at it, we saw a lot of it up in the northeastern part of the United States, and we knew it was just going to be a matter of time before it got down here.
You know, and I want to kind of move Hank over to your area a bit as a town manager, and I think as I sit and just looked at you, we were off air a while ago talking about this a bit, but the age group that you come from, that millennial age group, is driving a whole different kind of perception of what we should do and what we shouldn't do. What was your sense as a town manager in I'd say a typical rural eastern North Carolina town when you saw this kind of thing going on, knowing that you already had, as anybody that denies it, I guess, is just probably not real, but what was your thought of what we might do or what we might not do, and how quick did you feel like you needed to move on that?
Well, I think approaching any issue this significant requires a lot of thought and dedication before rolling out any type of policy change. But I think you just had to approach it with an outside-the-box way of thinking. The conventional ways of approaching drug addiction had not been working. The idea that you're going to incarcerate your way out of drug addiction has been tried for decades now and has been unsuccessful. So we just took a different approach. Nashville, North Carolina is the first municipality to try something like this in North Carolina, the third in the southeast. But Chief Campanello in Gloucester, Massachusetts tried this earlier this past year, and I just thought it was something worth looking into. You know, if it didn't work, you know, we haven't really lost anything. It's just give our citizens an opportunity to get a different type of help than the traditional methods we've used in past decades.
Chief, I think you called, and let's kind of move to that, you call this the HOPE Initiative. Tell us how, is this something that, again, Massachusetts has done a very interesting, informative job in this area, but is this something that came from somebody else as far as how you kind of sat down and looked at it from a law enforcement point of view? Because I know the traditional cop on the street typically, and we've done it, and I say we collectively, meaning me and others for years, we've trained law enforcement officers to approach substance abuse in one way, and that is to enforce the law, kick the door in, valid search warrant, arrest, incarcerate, and send them away as long as you can. You're a police chief. You had to step out of that mainline thinking a little bit. Have you had pushback on that?
I had done that for years as a law enforcement officer, and I have not had any pushback. There's not been one negative thing that we have heard from anybody in the community and anybody that we've talked to about the program and its implementation. And I think just like Mr. Raper was saying, I think sometimes it just takes somebody to kind of spark that we need to change direction, or we need to look at this and see if it's working here, can we do the same thing? And that's really what it was. I've been called a non-traditional police officer before, but yeah. So I think that's really what kind of sparked things a little bit.
The name HOPE Initiative. Tell us how that came about, and either one of you, how you came up with that.
It's not an acronym for anything, but you know, the underlying premise is that it was an initiative that we were undertaking in Nashville, North Carolina, and HOPE is really what someone with substance abuse or substance use disorder really needs, because many of them at that point have lost all hope, and so that's what this program tries to provide for them.
As an attorney, when you, not only as a county manager with numerous credentials, I'll speak to some of those later, but as a county, as a person that's in charge of a town, the leadership of a town, did you sense that when you move forward with this, that there would be some sense of, wait a minute, the police chief is talking about saying, look, if you have an addictive issue, opioid addiction, heroin, whatever, if you come in, you bring your drugs and you need help, we'll help you get help. Was there anything legal there started going through your mind? Can we do this? Is there something wrong with doing that? Why can't we do this? I mean, because I know you probably examined it inside out.
Absolutely. I think we were certainly concerned before we're just getting started. We wanted to see really who else out there in North Carolina is doing anything like this. And when I dug into it, and I believe the chief started researching into it, we really found that there was no one out there in North Carolina that had any program even more close to what we were talking about doing. Once we found that, we really wanted to look and say, well, is there some type of legal barrier to moving forward with the HOPE initiative? And when we didn't find any, at that point, we decided we needed to reach out to our local law enforcement partners and make sure that they at least were on board and not going to be against our program. And so we reached out at that time to the district attorney for our area, made contact with the sheriff of Nash County, obviously coordinated with our local mayor and town council, and spoke with some key leaders in the public to make sure we had some support. And everything we received, I think maybe the most remarkable thing about getting this program off the ground was how little, really no resistance at all from anybody. I think this is an example of law enforcement really catching up to the public than anything else. That there's been a need here for quite some time, and now law enforcement's catching up and filling that void.
So Nashville, when you started this program, now tell us how long it's been in effect, and to this point, where we are now in the time from the beginning of the program to now, how would you score the success rate so far of the program?
So we started looking at this back in October of last year. So the planning phase lasted literally from October all the way through February 9th is when we actually launched it and went public, February 9th of this year. And since, when I've been asked this many times, what was I afraid of or anticipate? And at first, my first initial thought was, what if nobody shows up to the police department? And then what if 100 people show up? Are we going to be able to handle that volume? And as time has progressed, we're in 4 months into it now. We've had 23 people come through the program. And, early on, Mr. Raper and I had a discussion about, how well we thought the program was going to go and how we were going to kind of measure how effective it was. And I think two things came out of that initially was that, one, I know we are saving lives, and the other one was that there's really some good changes going on in the health system.
We're going to take our first break, and we'll come back. I want to explore a little bit more into the details of the program and what research you did and how you laid out that plan. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. We're talking about a new innovative approach for law enforcement in small towns and communities here in North Carolina. We'll be back in a moment.
You're out for an evening on the town. Finally a chance to relax and forget that you left your front door completely unlocked. Fortunately, you just installed a security system from Star Communications. With just your cell phone, you can check on your house, lock it down, light it up, and get back to relaxing.
You forgot to put Buster in his crate.
Unfortunately, we can't help with that. Security and automation from Star Communications. Call today to find out more.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on the air. We're talking to a couple of folks that, if you missed the introduction to the segment today, we're talking about substance abuse, but particularly from a different angle. Hank Raper. And Hank, I covered some of the particulars of your bio to include your degree in law from Campbell. I talked a bit about some awards you received. I think I mentioned, if I didn't, I'm fixing to mention it now, that you graduated summa cum laude at 2011 at 2 degrees Bachelor of Arts in Government with a concentration in Public Administration, a Bachelor of Science in Social Service or Social Science History. The other thing is that you're part of an organization here, that's North Carolina City and County Management Association, and when I look at that association, they're very much involved in the legislative issues, kinds of things that you need to know as a town manager is happening. Also, my other guest is Chief Tom Bashore. Tom, your background is stellar as well. I didn't touch on your academics. You got a Bachelor of Science degree in Criminal Justice from Western Carolina, a Master's in Leadership, and you also have instructor certification, Advanced Law Enforcement Certificate, graduate of UNC School of Government, Municipal and County Administration course. You still teach. It sounds like you've got not only a busy job life, but you got a busy family life. When I look at 5 children, say, I won't get into detail. Exactly. So, and I've hit that grandfather moment, and it's a wonderful place to be. I'll go ahead and share that. Thank you guys for being here so much. We're talking about this project that was initiated. One of the, I guess we just talked about it. One of the only one that exists in North Carolina, called the HOPE Initiative. at Nashville Police Department. And the brochure is pretty much you've got the graphic that's pretty neat. But talk to us about this program. The brochure shows a police department badge. It shows people that are reaching up, the pictorial view of it. And we talked about the devastation of heroin, which we're seeing that obviously is coming from prescription, a lot of prescription drug use, but you can actually buy heroin much cheaper on the street, right, Chief?
Yes, absolutely.
So you guys sat down, whose idea, what was the first step? Which one of you said, well, I need to go to the other one first, and then which one of you guys said, what are you talking about? So this is
and him.
Yeah, you guys.
Yeah.
Well, I really I started in my position as town manager in Nashville back on October the 19th. Mm-hmm. So one of my very first projects when I got here was to have this conversation with the chief of identifying ourselves in Nash County as a rural community, recognizing that this was a problem that not knowing how deep the problem was, but recognizing the trend was that this problem was going to get out of control. And I had a conversation with the chief that first week I was on the job saying, this is a program I've heard of in Massachusetts. I don't know what really is out there in North Carolina, but I just want us to look into this a little deeper, see if this is a possibility for us. And from there, I think I did some research. Chief Bayshore certainly done extensive research, and it just kind of grew as an idea from there.
Chief, when you obviously you knew that you got a town manager that's of this age that I've referred to earlier as a millennial, which is a compliment.
Right.
As a millennial, you know that they're looking at things different than what guys like me and obviously you much younger than I am. They look at things different, but not only that, they expect more immediate change.
Sure.
Is you agree with that?
That's fair.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, so when you got that message, what was your first concern?
Well, I've always appreciated looking at things from different angles, and so for somebody to come in that's going to be my boss now, to be able to do that right out of the gate was really refreshing, and so I knew that he was not going to have a problem, or wasn't going to be, well, we've always done it that way, so let's continue doing things that way. He brought a breath of fresh air that I knew that was going to be challenging for myself as a police chief and the police department, but good for the town.
Did you have to sell it to your police officers?
No, I mean, it wasn't one of those things where they were, I don't want to do this, or it's a soft approach to crime or anything like that. Yeah. We had already been doing things in the town of Nashville that kind of led up to or lend itself to this. Some things such as we already had 2 officers dedicated to a regional task force in the area targeting dealers. 2 years prior to that, we had got a grant from CVS to put in a medical drop box so people could come into the lobby of the police department and drop their medications off. And we've taken in hundreds of thousands of prescription medications through that drop box alone. So I don't think it was a shock really to anybody that it wasn't a natural progression really to continue on doing unique things.
The word hope, the phrase hope initiative was that, and we talked about that a little bit, but that part of that initiative being as kind of the first in North Carolina initiating something, but the idea of hope coming from there's a possibility that there is a person with an addiction out there and you opened another door for some hope for those people. But yet the other side of that, Hank, I think is hope for the community, because we can't keep spending but so much, can we?
That's right. It's certainly an issue from a law enforcement perspective that you're having to pour more and more resources into the law enforcement tactics to arrest people for drug offenses, and seeing these people go to jail, even go to prison, come back out and go right back into the same environments, committing the same habits over and over again. That certainly something has to change, and our program is something that we wanted to address to just mix up the typical standard approach to law enforcement. And even to this day, we've already seen some significant changes. With our program rolled out on February the 9th, we've already seen in 3 key areas some changes in our crime statistics, from comparing from since February to June of 2015 to February to June of 2016. We can see our overall burglary statistics are down 53%. Residential burglary is down 63%, and larceny rates are down 36% in Nashville from 1 year.
That's huge. Chief, can you tie that directly to the efforts of this program?
I mean, obviously, the program's pretty young, and so
Data's still coming in.
Data's still coming in, obviously.
But something changed.
But yes, something's changed, and so and I do believe that it has a direct correlation on those statistics from the number of people that we've helped already, and getting, just one individual. You think about one person that has a substance use disorder, they probably already lost their job. They've probably broken all the ties or destroyed ties that they have with their family because they've stolen everything from them. And so now the only way to support that habit that they have every single day, it's not like I need it once a week, it's every single day. They go out and they break into cars, they break into homes to be able to steal that merchandise to pawn or to sell for the drug. And so just removing one of those individuals, could have a significant effect on your crime rates, especially your petty crimes.
And I want to touch on this before we do get so far down the pipe and we don't do it. When somebody comes in, let's do a walk-in. Somebody comes in and says, as you have said in your literature, if you come to the Nashville Police Department, if you have drugs, if you bring them and lay them down and say, look, I need some help. First of all, they're not arrested.
Not arrested.
Not arrested. Second, they got to commit that they're going to receive the help that you render.
Correct.
So are they transferred to rehab, or how do you handle, I guess my question would be, what should that person anticipate?
Yeah.
If they're possibly even listening, out there on YouTube or whatever they may listen to the show on, if they're listening and they hear this, what should they anticipate?
First of all, part of the program really is to reduce the stigma that's attached to substance use disorder, and so just the welcome that we give them when they come in, that it's not going to be what their typical interaction with law enforcement has been in the past. So if they have drugs, if they have paraphernalia on them, we're going to take those and destroy it. We're not going to ask them questions. We're not going to charge them. We're not curious about where they got their dope from yesterday. I don't care about that. All I care about is getting that individual assistance to get them off the drug into recovery so that they can become a normal, productive citizen. And so they would initially come into the police department, we'd bring them back to a private area, and then we have a network of volunteers that we immediately reach out to. We've had 37 volunteers so far that help us with the program.
So they get them to providers for clinical assistance and that kind of thing?
Yes, the volunteers come in, and so we're at the police station maybe 30, 40 minutes tops, and that includes the time that it takes for a volunteer to get there. The volunteer starts to build rapport with the individual, provide support for them, and then the three of us go down to start the process, which usually starts at the local ED, the emergency department.
It's pretty huge when I hear numbers like 23 from just the very early stages of this program. It just seems to be looking at the population of Nashville, around 5,000 or 6,000, and you look at, that's a large number when you do percentages, or am I looking at that wrong, Hank?
Absolutely. I think part of it is, we're recognizing how big the problem is out there, and maybe we're the first out of the gate. Some of these people are needing the help, are coming to us from all outside of Nashville, some in Nashville, from all over the place wanting the help. Part of it is just the severity of the crisis.
The real issue, I think, and we're going to have to go to a break in a minute, but I wanted to touch on a program that 60 Minutes aired again just this weekend, and it was on the new direction of drugs, and it was talking about Michael Bonicelli, who is the I guess the chief drug policy guy in the United States, and he made several statements that was interesting. Scott Pelley asked him the question, said, so basically you're saying the last 40 years has been wrong, and in his response to that, he says it has all been wrong. Basically, all of it's been wrong. 21 million Americans are addicted to drugs in some form. That includes alcohol. And also he talks about half of all federal inmates particularly, but even in some state and local lockups, even more than that, are there because of drug-related crimes. So when we come back from break, I want to kind of delve into that a little bit and get both the academic and street level views of that. We'll be back in just a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about substance abuse, its impact in your community, the change of mind thinking as we go through this process. Call a friend, stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.
Whether it's video, voice, internet, or cellular, Star Communications connects you to the things you love. It's what we do and have done for over 50 years. Star Communications, your local technology company.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you for being with us today. I want to thank you for your continued input. We Should Know is on there, have going on in now, I think, a little over 6 years with this show, and the strategic importance is we've been responding to a lot of your requests on what you would like to hear more about, what you would like to have a better understanding of, suggestions on people and persons of interest that we could bring to the show. We Should Know edu@gmail.com is where you can send those messages if you want to send them to our post office box, P.O. Box 1482, Clinton, North Carolina. I want to open the second half of the show today. We're talking with Chief Tom Bashir and the town manager of Nashville, North Carolina. And we're talking with you guys, Hank Raper, as the town manager, about an issue that was highlighted again on 60 Minutes just this weekend. And I want to quote from that show from Michael Bonicelli. And basically the question was asked, what have we learned? And one of the things that he said immediately was, we can't arrest and incarcerate addiction out of people. He also said, we've learned addiction is a brain disease. It is not a moral failing. Further, he said, this is not about bad people who are choosing to continue to use drugs because they lack willpower. And again, I'm quoting, you know, we don't expect people with cancer just to stop having cancer. Those are pretty bold statements on our traditional way of thinking about addiction, Chief. I mean, as having some relationship with law enforcement for years, I mean, I recall the days when I would go out to schoolhouses, which is laughable now, and do programs for teachers and burn little pills so they would know what marijuana smelled like. And now we've got, what, 20 plus states that's got some form of legalized marijuana.
Yeah.
So where are we headed, and how does programs like this possibly help us better intervene? And I'm going to start with you on that one, Hank.
Well, you clarify your question.
Okay, so for example, this kind of program in Nashville,
Right.
that is obviously new
Right.
in North Carolina. We talked about it in the beginning. Is this a program that's going to help us better understand the importance that this is a brain disease, that this is not just a criminal act?
I think this is catching law enforcement up with the ongoing process of addressing this issue. This is not just a law enforcement issue, it's a social services issue. This is a health issue. This is a mental health issue. This is a community issue. And I think the part of this HOPE Initiative program is this is part of the community policing model. And we're making the police department go out there and interact with the community through this program. But it's also something that we're using law enforcement as a way to address all of these things cohesively, that we're recognizing that law enforcement has a role to play besides just locking up bad guys, that there is a social services component to law enforcement today. There's also a recognizing the psychological and mental health needs of people as part of law enforcement today, and this is something that's evolving as we get deeper into the 21st century.
What does it say to law enforcement officers, that it's people like you that wear a badge every day, that go out there and they are doing exactly what they were trained to do, which is enforce the law? Is this program and the validity of this program going to be based on how our legislative folks respond and support it through looking at some of the legality parts of it? Because I'm going to have officers, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to have officers say, look, I don't know what you're talking about, but if it's illegal and it's against the law, we're going to have to arrest them. I mean, you've probably already faced it. So I'm trying to get these questions out, and maybe let's discuss that a little bit. That's because we've done it so long. We're talking decades this way, and they'll look at you and go, hey, you know, so and so, he violated law. Boom, we're going to arrest him.
You just, I mean, it takes a realization that by arresting that individual that truly needs or wants help to get past it, so that you don't have to continue to arrest them over and over again. Then you have to find alternative ways in dealing with them. The easy approach has always been just arrest them, take them to jail, and then I'm done with it, and it's somebody else's problem until it's my problem again when they're out back in my community committing crimes or not getting the help that they need. So it's a recurring thing over and over again. And so law enforcement just needs to really just accept the fact that our role in the community is not just to arrest people. We have to get beyond that. We are there to help individuals, not only the ones that we are dealing with that are good law-abiding citizens in the town, but even those individuals who do break the law, especially when they're talking about substance use, where sometimes they don't have a choice. They're doing it because they have to. And for me personally, and I think for a lot of people, you don't really understand it when you catch somebody with drugs and you arrest them and you don't know the extent of the problem that they have. You just think that, well, they're a bad person because they have drugs on them and they shouldn't have. Everybody knows that's against the law. You don't understand the ripple effect that it has in their own immediate family and outside of that. And until you do, it's very hard sometimes to be sympathetic or empathetic towards that individual, that yes, this person does need help, and if I can get them the help that they need, then I don't have to deal with them from a law enforcement perspective again.
Hank, as a town manager and somebody that's got an exemplary background and track record academically as a lawyer, when you look at this, what needs to be done to open that gate further to allow more visibility into what you guys are doing and why it's important? Where does it need to go from here? I mean, I'm more than happy to have you guys on my show, but we cover 8 or 10 counties, or maybe more in the eastern part of the state here. But the bigger picture would be to make other folks aware of what you're doing, what's been done in Massachusetts and other places, that they can do that. Where do we go from here?
I think one of the big things is the opportunity to be on programs like yours to really sell this program and talk about it. Give other law enforcement organizations also the opportunity to hear what we're doing and what our success has been, so that they'll be open to starting their own types of programs. Nashville, North Carolina may be the first out the gate, but we're certainly not the only law enforcement agency that this should be considered to start a program. I think at the state level, we certainly need more of an understanding and an education of the issue for our members of the General Assembly, so that they can take legislative action that will be appropriate to help with this. Obviously, financial support would be significant for any type of treatment for heroin and opioid addiction. Part of it is limited, and Chief Bayshore could address this a bit deeper, but acknowledging that there really isn't enough long-term treatment available for people in North Carolina, that many of the opportunities where we need to get someone, once they get past the detox level, to get them into a long-term treatment facility, there are very limited options as of today for getting people that help in North Carolina.
And Chief, that's one of the things that Hank just mentioned is part of this governor's task force. Some of their findings is not enough beds, the extreme wait times that they find in emergency departments throughout the state. Those kinds of things are outlying issues that are just part of this bigger picture.
Yeah, that's one of the first, I guess, issues really that we kind of ran up against, because you think about if somebody comes in and wants assistance, we get them through the initial detox, and that can last anywhere from 5 to 7 days. Mm-hmm. But once they've completed that initial detox, then they're given an outpatient process. Here's a doctor's appointment, please make that in 3 days, and they go right back into the same environment that they left from, and they're using within 24 hours. So you really wasted time. Yeah. So finding them places to go in longer term treatment, 30, 60, 90, 2-year programs to get into, to be able to get into recovery the way you should. Because you can't fix a problem that's been there manifested for years in 7 days. It's just impossible.
Hank, how do you in an objective way, or even can you in an objective way, quantify the cost that is displaced by having a program of this nature, by having a Hope Initiative program in your community versus not having it, where you have to use the traditional approach with a person that is substance abusing some form of substance, because it's extremely costly when you hire guys. And you used to have a street unit that went out and did drug arrests and so forth, and then you had to cart them to jail, and then they had to appear in court, and you go through all these things. So how do you deal with the mathematics on that?
It's almost immeasurable. I mean, there are certainly direct economic effects that you can see. The heroin addiction obviously makes it far more difficult for someone who is addicted to maintain employment. These things have dramatic impacts psychologically and emotionally on their family members. Many of these people who we've had come in have spouses, children, parents that care about them, siblings. You also have some major effects of this program that just spill over.
Mm-hmm. Those are the kinds of things I think that you probably hear a lot from your position as police chief. Folks maybe pull you over to the side, and I know you get the other reports where folks say, look, something's going on in a certain house and there's a lot of traffic in and out, and why don't you take care of that? So once you go there and once you have to make an aggressive arrest approach and incarcerate somebody, then they become part of what oftentimes in our language we would say you become part of the criminal justice system,
Right.
which is tremendously costly, which is tremendously, if you visit any courtroom in North Carolina, the country, I would suggest is tremendously foreboding for a person to look and see thousands of people, maybe at least hundreds.
Yeah, I mean, it really is amazing. I don't think that the math or the economics of it really. So far, we've had the 23 people that we've helped in our program. We've spent less than $2,000.
And possibly Hank saved as much as, just hypothetically.
Absolutely. It's hard to even put a number on it.
But it's more than that.
You can't measure it because you're talking about crimes that never happened.
Yeah.
You don't know what kind of physical harm could have happened to somebody if they had suffered an armed robbery, or a home broken into and had possessions or money stolen. There's no way to record those things.
Much less a disruption in the family and
Absolutely.
those kinds of issues. We're going to be back in a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, we're taking another break. We'll be back in a moment. Need to hear from the folks to help pay for this show in each and every week. We'll be back in just a moment. Call a friend, stay tuned.
What? How can that be? No way someone broke in and stole my TV. Unless I want to install steel bars, I'll call the experts in security. Star Communications is the one that I can trust to get the job done.
Yeah, the only thing worse than that is not feeling safe in your own home or business.
Call Star Communications now. We're your local security experts, from alarms and monitoring to automation and personal protection.
Word.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're coming up on our last segment here on the We Should Know Show. I want to thank all those folks at the radio station that mentions us each and every week. Robert Stroud of Bloody Shoes Radio Network on Saturdays. Gospel Hour during the lunch hour and the morning hour. Wayne Weeks. We appreciate Wayne's commentary. The morning show with the L-Man, Nolan Z, and Grandpa Tommy the Fly in the afternoon. And of course, Nicole for mentioning us each and every day in the introduction of this show. We're talking today with Hank Raper, who's the town manager for Nashville, North Carolina. I could just leave the North Carolina off and really think people has made a big time here. But the other person is Chief Tom Bashore. We thank you both for being here. And we're talking about a subject that's really kind of changing the way we look at things a little bit. And I would dare say testing the waters in North Carolina, one of the first of its kind, the Hope Initiative. It's about a different way of looking at substance abuse and addiction. And we've quoted some quotes from a 60 Minutes review that has actually, it's aired twice. This past weekend was the second time I think it's aired in the past 2 years. Very informative program. But this Hope Initiative, you guys have got going. Chief, as we went off air and we were talking on break a while ago, heroin addiction is truly significant, and you had some numbers. I want you to mention those numbers on this segment as it relates to the increase in addictive behavior and detox?
Yeah, we have a detox facility that's very close to us. We're fortunate in that respect because many departments don't have a detox facility that close to them. Mm-hmm. But we were looking at some of their statistics. In 2013, they had 36 admissions for heroin abuse. In 2014, it was 54. And then last year, 2015, it was 632. So there was a significant and dramatic increase in the number of admissions for heroin abuse in that detox facility alone.
Hank, that gets back to our conversation about the cost and the money and how we spend our money and taxpayer dollars, which it appears that, and I think I'm pretty much on target with this, our legislature is very concerned about that $22 billion plus being spent appropriately.
Absolutely.
So with what you just said, it just seems to me if we could come with an appropriate way of funding something that would reduce those kinds of costs, it would be significant.
Well, we have to look at this as what are we treating? Mm-hmm. Are we treating the crime or are we treating the person? The person has an addiction. If we're treating the crime, then all we're going to do is arrest an individual. They're going to go to jail. They're going to spend a few days there, and then they're going to be right back out on the street. They're going to go right back into their same environment, around the same people. They're going to be victims of drug dealers, continuing to feed them this habit. If we treat the addiction, then we give someone an opportunity for hope. We give someone an opportunity to get detox, to get assistance from someone in the medical community, to get help from a long-term drug treatment center where these individuals have an opportunity to rebound their lives. You never can completely cure an addiction like this, but get them the help that they can restart their lives, have dignity in their lives, have a career, take care of their families, rejoin the community at large.
One of the things we talked about, Chief, was the idea how do you quantitatively put a number on that, and really when you start including the impact on the family and how oftentimes it affects the larger family as a whole, it could easily be in the millions of dollars just with one person, I would think. Oh,
absolutely. And I guess one of the things that's kind of amazed me is, you know, even with some of the other drugs, heroin especially, it doesn't take, you don't have to look too deep into your family, your own family, mm-hmm. to be able to see someone that is possibly abusing heroin. And many times they have turned to that drug because it is cheaper than prescription medication. And so they were on it for whatever reasons, may have been legitimate, and now all of a sudden that prescription is stopped, and so they've turned to heroin. And it truly devastates the families, and it's hard to watch.
I think that's one of the things that and I want to kind of turn to the governor's task force, as you're aware, that he put together because opioid addiction is such a huge issue in North Carolina. It actually brought together a number of people to look at this and come up with recommendations on how we address this. I did not see anywhere in that addressed law enforcement agencies moving forward in this way to address that, but it did talk about literally the overwhelming number of people in emergency rooms throughout the state waiting for psychiatric care. It talked about the kind of the co-occurring issues. It talked about the military folks, that everything from suicide right on around, that if you just take it and say we're just looking at heroin, that's one thing, but as you just pointed out, Chief, it just seems to me that all of these other related addictive substances just compounds it even more.
Absolutely.
So when we think about that and we think about the hospitals, how important is medical care to Nashville, to other towns throughout North Carolina, and how long can they sustain under this, would you think?
Under the current approach, it's going to be very, very difficult to sustain this. With the increases we're seeing, I think our HOPE initiative is helping to address this problem, but there's going to be need from the federal government, need from the state government to address this from a financial end. The town of Nashville certainly financially cannot support heroin addiction for the entire state of North Carolina. Right. We're going to do everything we can to play the part that we can. But we're going to have a much larger approach from the state and federal level financially, a long-term plan on how we're going to treat this. That's going to need increased personnel from law enforcement to mental health professionals to drug addiction professionals to extra facilities, extra beds, and some type of plan to help these people restart their lives. It's going to take an approach that we haven't seen before to help us with this problem. Traditional tactics are not going to work.
Does this totally shift the way, Chief, that we think about this from a law enforcement perspective? And if so, what do we need to be doing training-wise to bring, I guess, a different window to look out of from what we have historically and continue to do, I guess?
Yeah, I think, at least from my perspective, being able to see both, at least from different angles now, we still need to be traditional law enforcement enforcers by attacking those individuals that are bringing the drugs into our state, attacking those individuals that are distributing those drugs to individual users. But we can't use those same tactics and that same approach of those that are addicted to these drugs. So that's the perspective in addition to those other traditional ones that we're trying to take with it, to attack it from different angles.
I think that's probably the hardest model to try to, I guess, to assess and to address is how do we do that from a town manager point of view, or from a county manager point of view, or even from a state management point of view. How do we address that in a kind of a twofold approach where we seal the door and say no more of this going on, but at the same time deal with what we've got in front of us, which is the people that are literally have, according to the director of drug policy in the United States, have a chronic brain disease.
That's exactly right. I mean, marrying those two together, sometimes we haven't really done a very good job because of lack of understanding. I mean, there is definitely a mental illness that is attached to substance use disorder in this country, and we just, for whatever reason, we don't want to acknowledge it, or we think that they're two separate issues when really they're together.
What kind of feedback are you getting from your associates on a state level, from the association that you're involved in, other city managers and county managers? Is this something they're talking about, or is it just not on their radar yet?
I don't think it's on their radar yet. I really haven't been receiving feedback from city or county managers or from anybody from the state. I think this is still so new for everybody. We're still actually having to educate large leaders from our local representatives on what this issue even is about, because this is, I think for many, it feels like this has been sprung upon them very rapidly. Mm-hmm. So I think we're at this point, we're still educating our leaders on what's going on.
Would this be something that you guys would like to express to the governor's task force that's looking at heroin and opioid addiction in the state? And I ask that not that I've got a gateway, but certainly there may be somebody listening that does.
Yeah, we would definitely welcome any avenues to be able to get more information out there about what we're doing and how that can be spread, and what other communities can do to help that also. We have spoken with representatives from the governor's office, who I'm sure has spoken with. Yes. So it's very early. We're only 4 months into this. It's brand new to North Carolina, and so it will take some education on everybody's part to understand, that this wasn't something that is a fly-by-night program that's going to disappear next week, and look at what Massachusetts has done and how far that they've come and how many people they've helped. And so the more we can get the word spread out there, obviously, the better.
Hank, I think one of the things that you can look at, though, is that I do see a groundswell of interest that may be coming your way. If somebody wanted to contact you, and from a county manager perspective, maybe didn't want to talk to the chief, can you give us a telephone number or some way to reach you?
Absolutely. They can reach me at my number at the town, which is 252-459-4511, or by email at henry.raper@townofnashvillenc.gov.
Okay, and we'll try to put that at the bottom of the screen on the TV side too, so folks can see it. Chief, I know sometimes law enforcement folks may say, well, I'm going to reach out and see what this guy's talking about. Is he trying to increase more work for us or what? So you mind giving your information?
No, absolutely, yeah. And we've had several police departments around the state and outside the state that have called us and asked about materials that we have and how to get started. So my email address is thomas.bashore@townofnashvillenc.gov. And then my phone number, I give out my my duty cell phone number, which is 252-903-8155.
Okay. I want to thank both of you guys for being here and trying to literally open this picture to a larger community. Thank you for coming to see us. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for being with us today. As always, we thank you for your input and continued support for this program. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week on the radio, and may God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.